Hi, so I'm James Brown of Stellar Radis, and here, if you look down here, is a repeater which came back to us. A guy had bought it some time ago and it had failed, and so he sent it back to us to ask us, is there anything we could do to fix it? So I opened it up to have a quick look to see what had happened, and if you can zoom in here, I'm not sure you can see this. This is the power supply section. We took out the lid here. This is the power supply section just in here. You can see that is actually the converter, and here's this is the input smoothing capacitor, is this capacitor here. Now when I tried to take the lid off here, it was actually quite hard to prise off, and I ended up actually, this part got failed. In the process of failing, had somehow welded itself onto this lid, and as I lifted it off, the whole can came off, and the capacitor, the internals of the capacitor, you can see here, this is an electrolytic capacitor. You can see it's a rolled up paper or foil of some sort, and they have a
that's
liquid.
Here, this part here.
That's in there, exactly. And in there, in between the rolled up parts, they have a liquid, a gel. And what happens is, it dries out over time, and eventually it will lose its capacitance, and the voltage converter won't work, and you already have quite a bit of heat in this section already, and you have a very large heat build up, and then the component blows.
This is typical of what we find
in these Chinese repeaters. They will not spend the money on components that are not heat sensitive. These are very, very heat sensitive components, and this is what happens. On a different place, you would have probably seen this is years ago with the big screens, big computer screens, or the old TVs. After about 10 years, in those cases, they would blow and they'd stop working. And the reason actually always was these capacitors. Now, those TVs and monitors didn't work at nearly as high temperature as these type of products, and also weren't on all the time. And so the lifespan of this type of device is much less than the lifespan of those monitors, even though they fail for the same reasons. Okay, so we just talked about the capacitor actually failing, but it doesn't fail immediately. What happens is the capacitor will have a certain value of capacitance of, say, 100 microfarads. And what happens is, over time, as it dries out, that capacitance level will start to drop from 100 to 95 to 98 to 90 to 85 to 80. And what it's used for is for smoothing the input to this voltage converter. And what happens is, as this capacitance drops, it smooths that less and less well. And what ends up happening is you have a very noisy power supply. And then this affects the RF of the amplifier. And what happens is, suddenly it will start to develop oscillation-like tones coming out of the front end. These will go up to the base station, and they'll wipe out a base station so that the base station can no longer service users. So the operators are obviously immediately notified automatically by the base station that this has occurred. So in a case like this, the repeater will be installed. It would work okay for a period of time, and then this would happen. And it might take a year, it might take 6 months, it might be 2 years before this happens. And I'm reliably informed by many regulators that with these cheaper Chinese products, it always happens. It's just a matter of time. So not only do you have the case of where you put in these high gain repeaters, they seem to work very well, they actually always create quite a lot of uplink noise, and this noise can hit the base station and desensitize it and cause problems. But over time, they will fail catastrophically, and the noise level that's actually hitting the base station will rise dramatically, causing real problems for the operators and for the cellular network infrastructure of the country.